All right, I'm a minute early. Welcome to January 31st Sunday session with Margo. I'm here in my very cold office that's heating up. The heater should probably turn off in a few minutes here. So I've got my blankie on today. Got this wild hairdo, as usual. That's what YouTube is for. That's what any of these things are for, is just to check our hair, right? Whoa. Cool. Well, I'm excited to chat a little today. I've got a couple topics. We'll see what comes up, what comes out. And if people have questions, I would love to take them over in the chat. And I guess before I get too into anything, I want to fix this light. It's kind of like in my face. Before I get too into anything, I wanted to share a little bit about the inspiration behind these weekly sessions. I'm pretty open-minded in terms of how the structure looks and winds up. It's kind of just an experiment right now. But my partner, Russell, has been pretty dedicated in terms of watching these weekly lives that a fellow named Curtis Stone has been doing. He wrote a book called The Urban Farmer, and he is a pretty radical farm guy. And my partner has been getting a lot of inspiration from him. And so one of the things he does is a weekly Q&A time. And I haven't been like super on top of soliciting questions during the week, but it's something that maybe I'll do more of, especially as we have more people join here. As it becomes a thing, he has like many thousands, I think, of people, or maybe it's a couple hundred people that watch his once a week streams. They're really amazing, entertaining, and thought-provoking. So I don't know. I mean, I'm not him, so I'm doing this my way. But hopefully we cover some cool stuff and you get some inspiration. And I guess my point with all of that was to say I'd love questions if you have them. About anything, really. So today I said I was going to talk about a couple things. One of those things is I wanted to talk about moon cycles and our connection with the moon as women. The other is masks and the current world we live in where that's a thing. And I have actually, it's funny, someone asked if I would talk about it. So of course I had a thing come up yesterday and a thing come up today now that have really sort of driven me to think more about it as well. So I'll share some of that with you. And because I think that's so fun, and sometimes a really cool theme comes up, sometimes not, but sometimes it stimulates conversation in a... So I think I'm going to start with that. I'm going to turn my heater down because I'm feeling toastier now. And if you are watching, there's I think 7 of you on right this moment. Maybe just take a moment and think if you have a question for me. If there's something you want to hear me talk about while I turn the heater down. Be right back. That was quick, huh? Marin's watching. Hi, Deva. Deva is the cutest, if you weren't aware. She is like a little fairy Fraggle Muppet. And I love her so much. I hope she's having such a fun Sunday. So now I want to ask you questions, Marin. What's Deva doing today? My little children have actually been playing together for maybe the first extended time since my son was born. He'll be 2 in a couple months. And it's been sort of miraculous. I went on a snowy walk this morning and got to talk to Marin. That was really nice. We were talking about the updated version of the Indie Birth workshop she's working on. And I'm going to give some input on as well. I'm excited to offer my first free workshop here in a really long time. I think the last time we offered something locally here in Duluth, as far as like it it was actually a paid workshop. It was a full day version of our free one plus some other stuff. That was, I think, last February. It was almost a year ago. And part of that is because of COVID stuff, but part of it's because I've just been really busy with other projects and haven't really had a space. And so I'm really excited. It'll have been a year since I've done it here, and I'll get to do it in my own new space. If you aren't aware, this is my new birth lair, we'll call it. Russell built shelves for a closet. He's quite productive, that man. It's like, I need shelves in this closet so I can put things away. And so he built me one this morning with the kids. That was sweet. Okay, so let's pull a card. I feel like this week has been really, for me, energetically pretty like smooth, and a lot of things have just kind of been like feeling like they've been falling into place. I've been trying to learn a lot and just get a better balance in terms of like how much I'm working and how much I'm with my kids, how much I'm cleaning my house, picking up my house, going to bed really early, which has been a thing I've been doing for a few months. I really pretty much am in bed by 8:30 with my kid that I put to sleep. So, okay. Hi, welcome. Tuning in from Joshua Tree, Bella Ella, your first indie birth gathering. Excited to listen and interact. Sweet. I was saying, if you weren't here, I would love to take questions and hear people's reflections as we go, comments, really anything, because maybe this would be fun to do as a Zoom sometime, because it would be cool to interact more. But this is what we're working with today. All right, I'm playing a card from this Gaia Oracle deck that I'm still getting acquainted with. Our lovely team member Julie sent it to me as a present, which is so fun. Who doesn't love getting presents in the mail? All right, so the card I've pulled today is the Peace card, dissolving unwanted or disturbing thoughts. So I'll show you that. And then I really like these cards in that they have affirmations that go along with them. So I'll read this and see what it brings up. I'd love to hear what it brings up for you. There's truly no point in worrying about things that are not in your control. Worry does not help anyone, nor does it help resolve anything. On the contrary, it often makes things worse than they actually are. Life is such that we can always find something to worry about. Yet for your own well-being and for the well-being of those around you, it is vital that you learn to deal with things in a more positive way. To stop the endless cycle of disturbing and negative thoughts, you are advised to train yourself to focus on the positive side of things. Gratefulness. Set aside time at the beginning and end of each day to meditate. Bring your awareness within. Feel and imagine yourself surrounded by love and light. Allow the universal light of love to fill your heart and mind. Imagine your thoughts dissolving and floating away into space. Your mind at peace, clear as a blue sky. Focus on all that you are grateful for in your life. Ooh, there's someone screaming. That's not peaceful. Where was I? Focus on all that you're grateful for, Mother Earth and the universe, for every blessing. So the affirmation that's tied to this card is, I trust in the power of love. I trust that all will unfold as it should. My mind is like a clear blue sky. My heart is filled with love. All upon this earth is bathed in a sea of love. Beautiful. So what that immediately makes me think of is I just sent out the newsletter for the week. So this is a new thing we're doing. Trying to build more structure into how we communicate with everyone out there in indie birth world. The newsletter it'll change a little bit week to week, but essentially has like a bunch of different fun recommendations and links and things to check out, some of which are from us, but some of which are from, what on earth is happening here? Some of which are from all kinds of other people. And one of the things I shared this week is a song from Trevor Hall, who's a really amazing musician. And he just came out with an album somewhat recently, I guess, maybe in the last few months, called In and Through the Body. And the first song on the album is called Blue Sky Mind. And I have found I like all of his music, but this most recent album has been my favorite for sure. And it's just like a beautiful meditation. And I often put it on during the day when I'm home with the kids. And it feels like it just helps everybody kind of settle into a nice groove. And I'd totally encourage you to go check it out. So there's a link for that in the newsletter that I just sent out. So if you haven't seen it yet, it's probably because I literally sent it out like in the last hour. Bella Ella said, yup, perfect card. Exactly what I've been intensely working with in the past week. Cool. I'm glad that that was feeling relevant. Should definitely check out that album. I know for me, I've been doing a lot of work around like in the morning, getting up, and the deal I have with Russell is in the morning I call him, which is funny because he gets up at 6, and then my little guy wakes up somewhere between 6 and 7:30. It really varies. And when he does and he's ready to get up for the day after we've nursed and stuff, I call him, and then he comes and takes the baby. And some days like today, I just got up with them and, got ready for the day and made my tea and started things off. But other days, I've really been trying to take some time, even if it's 5 minutes, to just sit with my journal. I really have been enjoying one that I had shown in like the recent TikTok I posted on Instagram. You could check out. It's called, what's it called? Practice You is what it's called. Practice You, a journal. And it's by Elena Brower, I believe. Let's see. Elena Brower, Practice You. It's really beautiful. I love it. And the prompts are open-ended enough that it feels like I can kind of take it. They're also directed enough that I don't just sit there like having writer's block, because that's something I struggle with. So having that little, even if it's 5 minutes of peace in the morning before getting up for the day, has really been beneficial to me. So I would encourage you to figure out a way to structure that into your day too. What was the other thing I wanted to share that I feel like I've been, okay, so is it Gina? I hope I'm saying it right. Said, hello, Margo, you mentioned something a couple weeks ago about nonviolent communication frameworks. Could you share a link or a reminder about how we can find some of that info? Yeah, so that's a good segue into the other thing I was going to say has been coming up for me this week. And I feel like this peace card is a cool reminder of just that we have some family stuff going on in our extended family. And having these nonviolent communication skills that we've been working on has been so awesome. And it's been so cool to see how just having these tools and a framework has brought so much more peace to the situation. And so, the nonviolent communication stuff. Let me pull up a link to post for you. And share a little bit more about how that's looked for me, because it's been really cool in like every aspect of my life, with my kids, with my partner, with clients, with our extended family, with friends. It's been just like so helpful in terms of just, kind of giving us a structure. So I'm not sure, because I haven't really used a ton of these online resources, but what I have done is I've actually teaches nonviolent communication. And I'm going to just post the link for the basic handout, because I think that's a cool place to start. But there's a book called Nonviolent Communication, and it's great. I also recently listened to another one called Say What You Mean, which was also really good. It was a spin-off of someone who was trained in the nonviolent communication method. But I wanted to find the 4. I have all my stuff inside. I should have it out here. Let me find it, because it's worth reading to you. Like the 4 tenets of nonviolent communication. See, now I'm not gonna be able to find it, but I have it all printed out, and I'm gonna make a binder. But essentially, the idea is that we're coming to communicate with each other from a place of connection, that we recognize that everything we do or say is really in an attempt to meet a need. And there's a third one that I can't remember. And then the fourth one is that we do not meet our needs at the expense of others. So I feel like that one's especially interesting just in the realm of parenting and partnering with young kids, and has brought up a lot of conversation in our house. Because sometimes it feels like the only way to get our needs met is at the expense of somebody else getting theirs met. And I haven't quite puzzled any of that out. If any of you have figured out the magic way that looks, I would love to hear it. Let's see. Yeah, I'll maybe post some other links over on the platform later on the social.indiebirth.org Mighty Network platform, for you all to check out. But essentially, the nonviolent communication thing is made up of 4 parts. It's observations, feelings, needs, and requests. So I did post the link to just the basic handout. And what I really have found helpful is there's also like a feelings sheet and a needs sheet. And then you have to connect your feelings to the needs that are either being met or not being met. And it's just like a way more descriptive way of communicating with other people. And both in when things are going well and when things are not going well. So, I'm feeling energetic, and I'm feeling excited because right now I'm meeting my need for like creativity and connection. So it's just like this really neat way to tap into some of those deeper layers. And I guess where I was going with that, with the peace is with our extended family, kind of like having some stuff come up and some difficulties and challenges. It's been so helpful for me, even just to prompt my partner to be like, how are you feeling right now? And what needs are being met or not. And, he was going to, make a phone call to someone in the extended family. And this isn't necessarily nonviolent communication, but I feel like that process has helped me open up to some of these other tools that I've learned and integrate them better. So, namely a lot of the work of Danielle Laporte. So I asked him, like, what is your intention with calling? What is the need that would be met by doing that? And instead of having one, he was like, I kind of don't know what the intention would be. So I said, if you don't know what your intention is, you probably should wait till you do know. And so he didn't make this phone call, which I think was a wise choice, till he can kind of like get a better sense of what his intention is, what his feelings are, what he's needing, and what he would be requesting. Or if he'd just maybe be calling with the intention of listening and supporting or something. So it's been, not that we're having perfect days when people aren't yelling at each other, because that definitely is pretty much every day at my house. But, I think that we're on the right track. And that's been something that's super helpful for us in trying to get some more, to deepen that sense of peace in our home. Cool. So yeah, there's a question or something here. Okay. Honesty said, I love the topics mentioned at the beginning. Excited to dive into those. My question for the day, I've been saving and working to do the Birth Warrior Project for a prereq for the midwifery school. Now there's an intro to midwifery course available. Can you speak to the differences or which to pursue? Yeah, let's talk about that. I was going to talk about that today too. Okay, so I probably need to make a flow chart or something, but it isn't too complicated. If your goal is to become a midwife and you want to go to the Indie Birth Midwifery School, we have 2 ways that you can get into the Indie Birth Midwifery School. One is through the Birth Warrior Project, and one is through our Intro to Autonomous Midwifery course, which is new and we just released. If you want to have a birth business where you are a doula, a birth educator, a birth consultant, whatever you want to call it, if you want to have a business and serve in one of those capacities I just mentioned, you should do the Birth Warrior Project, because it sets you up with all the tools to actually get started doing that, working with clients in that way, some childbirth ed materials and some extensive business information, education, support, and the weekly coaching calls, which keep you accountable. It's a 4-month time frame. where and then on those weekly calls, we talk about the material from the course and also go deeper. We do different like exercises and talk a lot about overcoming, like limiting beliefs and obstacles that we've kind of created for ourselves in launching or in launching a sustainable birth business. So we made that as kind of like a package to get people going, serving in the doula role. And some people who want to be midwives do want to be doulas first, or they want to be a doula while they work through school, so that they're bringing in some income, doing birth work while they're also studying and perhaps apprenticing. So that is what that looks like. If you do not want to do doula work and you just want to get into the meat and potatoes, get into the midwifery, you're not wanting to build a business, you're not wanting to, maybe do birth education, then our Intro to Midwifery course is some of the same material from the Birth Warrior Project, but it's more pared down and focused on just the stuff you would need to know as a beginning midwifery student. We do talk about apprenticeship in the Intro to Midwifery course. So you would be getting that information and be asked to, start thinking about what that might look like for you. What else would I say is the big difference? The other big difference is we don't have the weekly coaching calls, and it's not a timed course. So we encourage you to get through it in about 10 weeks. It's 10 modules, but you will have unlimited access to that Intro to Midwifery course. So that's what the price difference is about too. So the Birth Warrior Project is $1,800 and the Intro to Autonomous Midwifery course is $600. And the reason being, with the Birth Warrior Project, you will be going out into the world and making that back probably before you're even done with the 4 months. I just had somebody who's in the program, I think they're about halfway through, reach out and tell me they're working on their final projects and they already have their first 2 clients. So I hope that helps kind of describe the difference between the 2 pathways. If you have more questions, please post them because it helps us also in terms of knowing how to talk about this. Because there's probably questions that people have that we didn't foresee. Cool. Yeah, honestly, if you have other questions, I would love to hear them too. Okay. So moon stuff. Well, we're a few days past the full moon now. And when I was thinking about today, I was in full moon party mode because that's something that we did on Thursday night. We did a full moon party and a gathering at our house for the first time ever. And my daughter, like her main solstice Christmas present from me was that I signed us up for the 2021 Kids Moon Club. And I can post the link for that here too. The website is wilderchild.com. And I believe it's only a once a year thing where they enroll. So if you didn't get in on it this year, you'll have to wait till next year. It's super fun. There's really cool activities. She's got book lists and playlists and, encourages you as part of it to get outside and do a phenology walk where you observe what's happening in nature around you at this time of year during this moon of the year. So we actually didn't get to that till yesterday. Me and Russell and the kids walked the little trail that's on our piece of land here. It's like a 1/4 mile loop through the forest. And it was super fun. My daughter brought her notebook and sort of just took notes on what she noticed and what she didn't notice. We saw an eagle fly over, which was super cool. And then there were lots of like little birds making lots of noise in a tree. And obviously here in Minnesota, it's snowy. So she was writing down those notes. We're going to do a second walk before the end of the moon. And then we're going to take a family vote on what to call this moon. So they were calling this moon the Wolf Moon in our Kids Moon Club, which is cool and makes sense and was something that was, a name that was bestowed by, I think it was a tribe in the northeastern part of the U.S. But we don't we don't hear wolves here. So we probably will come up with a different name for the moon that happens in January. So yeah, I was really excited to do that with her, especially. And she is so into the idea of moon cycles. And when I do get a bleed, when I'm on my moon, I call it that. I call it a moon cycle. And so there was a long period of time when I was pregnant and almost 18 months, I think, postpartum that I wasn't bleeding. So it's just been in the last few months that that's been a part of my life again and has renewed some of her interest in that. And so I've told her for a long time that when she gets her first cycle that we will have a party and she'll get to, have a moon party. And so she always talks about how excited she is for that. And it felt like the perfect thing to do with her this year. So I am someone who is not always in tune with that. I often forget when the full moon is happening until all of my hippie friends remind me. And so it's a thing that I'm endeavoring to do this year is to just be keeping better track and noticing more for myself. So this will tie in together. I've been doing some form of fertility awareness for the last, I don't even know, 10, 11 years, something like that. And maybe 12. Wow. Yeah, 12-ish years. And I definitely feel very in tune with my body in that way, that I notice the way my energy is different at times of ovulation versus between ovulation and bleeding and between bleeding and ovulation. Those are things that I feel like I've gotten really good at noticing. And it's also really cool then to connect that with the moon piece. And I did happen to ovulate, I think the day before the full moon last week. So super interesting when they do coincide. And for a lot of women, they find that that is the case, whether you're tuned in or not, but especially when you're tuned in to what's going on with the moon, then it is often that our cycles do line up and that ovulation coincides roughly with the full moon and bleeding coincides roughly with the new moon. So it's super, super fascinating. If it's something that you haven't looked into yourself yet, I would definitely encourage you to do that. I just wanted to share a couple books about fertility awareness that I recommend. The Fifth Vital Sign is really great. It's probably my favorite one at the moment and is one that I recommend to people who are wanting to be midwives and women in our midwifery school. It's fantastic. It covers a lot more than just fertility awareness. It talks about, coming off of the pill and some of like the side effects of being on the pill and all kinds of things. So I love it. I love her, Lisa Hendrickson-Jack. She has a great podcast called Fertility Friday. She was also on my Well Actually podcast, so you could totally check out that episode. It was a lot of fun. The other book I really love is The Garden of Fertility by Katie Singer. It's an older book, but it's also, I like the shape of it. I don't know if that matters to other people, but I like how big the pages are. This one feels more like for reading. This one feels more like for studying. I don't know if that makes any sense, but I really enjoy her. And she has a self-study course. She's got a lot of cool ideas for specific issues that you might come across as you're tracking your cycles. And they're very like practical. They're not, they don't feel super wacky, but so like she has a low progesterone section and she's got 5 different specific ideas for people that are experiencing that. And I am someone who has experienced that. So, she also talks a little bit about the moon cycle in here and connecting in that way. And then I don't have any to kind of do the show and tell with, but Lisa Lister's books are really incredible if you are wanting to figure out how your, human self and your energy levels and mood and creativity and who you are as a woman sort of ebbs and flows with the cycles of the moon. And I'm trying to remember what book I'm thinking of. So if anybody has that on the tip of their tongue, let me know. But she has some really cool YouTube videos also, and also some books. Code Red, I think, is the one I'm thinking of. Yeah. And she was going to be one of our speakers at a retreat, and then we postponed the retreat indefinitely. But I'm looking forward to doing that again someday, connecting with all of you in person. Trying to think what else I want to say about moon cycles. If you have questions, I'd love to see them. I think sometimes in the birth world, people talk about labor starting with full moons. I don't know what the science is around that. I feel like it's definitely a possibility, but it also doesn't necessarily feel like I've experienced that myself as a midwife, like storms of babies around the full moon, in case anyone was wondering about that. Cool. So the other thing I wanted to talk about, and we can certainly circle back to this if people have questions that they haven't finished typing out yet or something. But the other thing I wanted to talk about, and this does kind of tie in to the nonviolent communication stuff, is mask wearing. So where to start, what a weird time we live in. So essentially from the start of things with COVID, here in Duluth, the first place that required masks, to my knowledge, or the first place that I was frequenting that required masks was our local Whole Foods co-op. So not the big Whole Foods that you maybe are familiar with, but our little Whole Foods that started before the big Whole Foods. Does that make sense? It's an independent co-op grocery store. And so I was personally appalled and decided that I was going to take my business elsewhere. And I did for a while and shopped at other grocery stores until they also started requiring masks. And we had the statewide mandate go into effect in like June or something here in Minnesota. So at that point, I switched to just doing carry-out groceries, and I've done a mix of all the different grocery stores and have just sort of rearranged my life to make that work. And in some ways, it's actually better to just do the curbside thing. It's kind of cool that someone else just does my shopping. But funny enough, today I had ordered last night our groceries for the week. And I think I've talked about it here. I've been doing work week lunch. They essentially have like a meal planning program, and it's really great. Just go check it out. I won't talk about it too much because I know I've talked about it other places. So I figured out what we needed for the week and put it all into our silly app, which it's now switched. It's not Instacart anymore. It's some other app, Mercato. And put in our order and sent Russell and the kids off at 9 to do that while I was finishing up the newsletter. So they picked up the groceries and I went on a walk, talked to Mirren, did this newsletter thing, and they unloaded the stuff. And Russell mentioned like, oh, why did you only get 1 dozen eggs? Because we ate way more eggs than that at our house. We're all egg eaters in the morning. And I said, I didn't. I definitely ordered 2. So it turned out they had charged us for 2, but they only got us 1. They also had messed up they had given us less leeks, which is funny, and like whatever, I can get by with less leeks than I asked for. And but then they got us hot Italian sausage instead of mild Italian sausage. So I had to call the guy and let him know like this happened, and he refunded me, but it's 20 minutes essentially to get there and 20 minutes back. And it's going to be another 45 minutes or an hour out of my life that either Russell and the kids or me and the kids or one of us without the kids has to go do now to get the stuff for the meals that we are going to meal prep today. Like there's not a lot of wiggle room. We've been prepping almost all of our meals on Sunday afternoons. It's amazing. So every time I'm hungry, I can just go grab a meal and heat it up, and it's ready and it's good and it's delicious. The recipes are so good. But tomorrow is my big midwifery day, and I can't help cook tomorrow. So one of us is probably going to have to go back into town today. And, right, Russell is more open-minded about the mask thing than I am. And, but I am not open-minded at all. I refuse to wear one in almost every single situation. The couple times I've run in with my fake mask on, it's like a mesh mask that I got made for me so that I could get to Arizona to be with Marin when she had Rumi. The times that I've even worn my fake mask in, I just feel so gross and so like not in my integrity, because the truth is I don't believe I am sick, and I don't believe that if I was sick that I'm a danger to other people. And I don't believe that, I do believe that COVID could kill someone who is already predisposed to getting sick and, has high risk factors going on. Like, I do think that it is a real thing. Like, I'm not denying that the virus exists, but there are also so many other viruses that also kill people. And I think that I don't know, I'm kind of not a conspiracy theorist. Not that anything is wrong with people who are into that, because we probably need people questioning things and looking into things for us, right? I'm just saying, like, I usually don't spend my time in that way, but I just can feel for myself that this isn't about a virus. This is about control, and it's about controlling us as a population and getting us used to being told what to do in an even more extreme way than ever before in the history of at least the US. And maybe that's extreme. Maybe there are other examples that are just as egregious, but on a mass level, it just feels like a litmus test in a lot of ways. And for me, I just want to be able to make a choice for myself as an adult. I do not ever appreciate being told what to do by someone other than me, and certainly not by the government. So, what else do I want to say about that? I think it's all so fascinating. Like, I think it's just the most fascinating thing to see where people come down on the issue. I talked a little bit about this a few weeks ago on an Instagram Live. My daughter had been running, the policy had been that every kid had to wear a mask the whole year, but we never let her wear one. Like, we never sent her with one. There was one day she came home with one and said that the guy had told her she needed it. But aside from like that one incident, it was never a thing. She never wore one. And then all of a sudden she was stopped one day getting on the bus, and the guy said, if you want to ride the bus, you have to have one. So we stopped sending her on the bus. And that is so that was an interesting thing. And then the owner of the bus company got in touch with me, and he said that he wished that wasn't the case, but he had to comply with these mandates, and it's his business, but he wished it wasn't the case, and he was totally with me and thought it was all a bunch of bullshit. So it's so interesting to see the way that it looks for different people. So some people being like, of course, even within my circles, like, I'm going to follow the mandates. That's what feels right for me and my family. To like, we're seeing people, but only outside, to, we're seeing everybody and it's totally fine for our family to do that. It's just so interesting to see like this full spectrum and like people making decisions and making them differently from day to day and week to week. When for me, and this isn't good or bad, it's just, this is an observation. Like, for our family, it's been the same from day one till now. Like, we're not afraid. We're not worried. We don't think that any of us are going to die from this. And we don't want to pretend that we're sick and put that into the universe and put that into our own bodies understanding of the world that like, oh, we might be carrying this deadly virus. So we better act accordingly, even if it makes us uncomfortable, even if it makes it so we're not breathing well, even if it makes it so we're having to breathe in like this stinky mask air. Ugh, it's so gross. So to me, it kind of reaffirmed this idea that like we have to make ourselves uncomfortable to make other people more comfortable. And so especially with my daughter and the bus example, she and I talked a lot about that. And the guy actually said that to her. He said, well, if you don't wear one and the other kids feel like they have to wear one, like that's not fair to them. And I told her, like, that is absolutely not true. We each are responsible for ourselves and our own comfort levels and what we want to do with our own bodies. And we do not have to make ourselves uncomfortable to make other people feel better. That's gross. So we've talked a lot about that. What else did I want to say about that? I don't wear them with my clients. I guess that's maybe what people were curious about too. I have on my website that I don't wear a mask and I don't work with clients who feel they need to wear a mask because it makes me really uncomfortable and makes me feel like I can't emotionally connect with someone. And to me, again, this litmus test idea of like, how do you see the world and how are you walking through the world? And would we be aligned as midwife and mama together? So I think that that's a really interesting thing. I've had some people not hire me because of it. And then I've had some people hire me because of it, because they were so excited to read that and see that someone shared their same beliefs and feelings around it. Yeah. Where was I going with that? Okay. So I guess the other thing that came up with mask stuff this week, funny enough, so something today now came up because I'm like, I would happily like take the 40-minute drive to listen to an audiobook, run into the grocery store and grab the couple things I need. I don't really want to put in another curbside order, especially when they messed it up already once today. But I'm also not going to wear a mask. So where I was going with this, with the nonviolent communication piece, is I told Russell, like, I'm going to call them. Today, I probably won't be able to talk to the manager because it's Sunday, but I'm going to talk to them, call them, talk to them, message with whoever to call me back to talk about like how totally not cool this whole thing is, and how disappointed I am that they were the first to jump on the bandwagon when it wasn't even mandatory by the state. Not that that matters at all. And just that I am disappointed that a place that focuses on health and prevention and organic food and, you know, herbs and supplements would buy into this mainstream narrative around COVID-19 when we've seen that it's not accurate. Like, and it's so interesting because I think a lot of people have started waking up to that just super recently, especially post-election. All of a sudden, like the fervor has kind of died down. And I think the media knows that if they keep pushing that exact same narrative, people are going to start pushing back, is what it feels like to me. And it feels like people locally here, like we held this moon party the other night and we had at least 5 different families with a bunch of kids all playing outside and sledding and sharing dinner and enjoying each other's company. And a few people made like comments about like, this is the first time I've done something like this in a year. But mostly it just felt normal because the people who came wouldn't have come if they were super concerned, is my thought. So yeah, that's the nonviolent communication piece. It's been throughout the pandemic a thing that's needed to be like negotiated and sussed out in such an interesting way. Like you don't ever know what another person believes about this heated thing. Even with my own family, it's been like, oh, do you want to get together? Are you doing that? Like, I don't know, like no judgment if you're not. And it can be this really tricky thing to navigate. So I'm grateful for some of those tools to help make those conversations easier. And then I'm really excited to use to the co-op this week. So I'm telling you all that. You can keep me accountable. I'll let you know how it goes next Sunday. I have to spend some time with my feelings and need sheets, but mostly I'm feeling just so disappointed and sort of disgusted. And what's another word I would say I'm feeling? Just really frustrated because I have a need for ease around getting my groceries for my family. I have a need for feeling like I have a need for, I guess, in a lot of ways, the co-op for me had fulfilled some needs around community. You know, I'd run into people I knew there and have conversations and just like being out in the world and connecting. And I feel like that was taken away from me. And I'll have to visit, like I said, the need sheet some more, but and spend some time figuring out how I want to craft the message. But I feel like I have to say something and let them know, like as a business owner myself, I get it, that it's hard and that there was pressure from people in the community to do this a certain way. But at the end of the day, like, that's the need that for me that I come back to so often in any context, the need for autonomy. Whether it's birth, whether it's the grocery store, whether it's like whatever with my kids, whether it's with my partner. For me, that's a really important need. And when I feel like that is being threatened, for me, that feels really dangerous. And I really just want to communicate that to them because I don't know how much they've heard from either side, if there are sides, but most people aren't really, no matter which position they're taking, aren't really approaching this in a way of talking about like how it actually impacts them as a human. It's more just like, I'm right, you're wrong. And I think there's room for all of it. Like if you want to wear a mask, wear a mask. If you want to stay 6 feet away from me or 12 feet away from me, stay 6 or 12 feet away from me. But you know, and it is a business and it's a private business and they can have boundaries and they can say that you have to wear a mask. But also as a customer and as someone who is part of this, you know, organic foods kind of like community, I can also say my piece. And part of that might be not spending my money there, which I did for a while. And I did stop for a while. And then for convenience purposes, you know, kind of went back to it. So I'm not sure how that'll suss out in the coming weeks and months, especially if they're going to keep screwing up my order. But I feel like it's time for me to say something. I feel like for a long time I was like, oh, this will all be over in 2 weeks or 4 weeks or 2 months. And at this point, it's pretty clear, like, this is not going to be over anytime soon. And we all need to say how this is impacting us in our lives and find the words to do that in a way that's like really bold and courageous and true and feels the way we want it to feel. So the other thing that came up, pardon me, I gotta drink some water here as I'm ranting. Hopefully this is interesting. Looks like people are staying on, so it must be. Happy to answer questions, or I'd love to hear what you think of what I'm saying, since I know this is perhaps really crazy to some people. But so the other thing that happened was yesterday I was taking my daughter out, which we don't usually do a lot of driving around, so it's funny that we've gone out yesterday and today. But since we've moved a little farther out of town, it's usually pretty rare. But a friend had recommended that we go get some ice cream next time we needed a girl date, because that's something they know that me and Celosia do. And there's a local ice cream shop, and it's called Love Creamery. So I'll just say it. And I called before we left the house, just being like, hey, I'm wanting to put in an order for curbside, like delivery, like they bring it out to your car. And they were like, oh, well, are you here or are you not here yet? And I said, well, we haven't left the house. And they said, call us back when you're here. So I said, okay. Their menu online said scoops we're serving today, or what we're scooping today, or whatever. And then they had like their pints and cool ice cream sandwich combos and stuff. And so we showed up, me and Celosia, and had our order ready to go and called them back. And I said, you know, we want a scoop of this and a scoop of that. And then she stopped me and said, oh, we don't do scoops curbside. Like they can't put the scoop of ice cream in a cup and bring it out. And I was going to buy some pints anyways, maybe a ice cream sandwich, but we also wanted a couple just like little. Anyways, Russell wanted a kind, she wanted a kind, I was going to have a kind, and we were going to bring some pints home. So I said, what do you mean you don't bring scoops curbside? And she said, oh, well, we just don't. But, we are offering full service inside. You just can't sit down. And so I said, so let me get this straight. I can come in, but you can't scoop it and bring it to my car? And she said, yeah. And I said, well, I don't wear masks, so I'm not going to come in and do that. You really can't bring it out? She's like, no, we can't. We can't do that curbside. So I don't know if this is like some other ridiculous rule, if this is something they came up with. I don't really know, because I was just like flabbergasted. Had driven 20 minutes to go get ice cream with a very excited little girl in the back. And so on the phone, I said, well, forget it. Like, I'll just get some pints then. Told her what we wanted. But then I stopped myself and said, well, okay, whatever. I'll just come in. I'll find whatever, I'll find something. I'll find my mask and come in. Because I didn't even know if I had one in the car. And that's great, but you will have to wear a mask. And I just felt so angry. So hung up the phone, and I was rummaging around looking for a mask, and kind of couldn't find one within the first few seconds of looking, and decided, like, fuck this. Like, I'm not going to wear a mask. I'm not going in there. And that lady was rude, and I'm not going to give them my money now. I was going to drop like $30 on ice cream, and they couldn't walk a cup of ice cream out to me. Like, and then were rude about this mask thing. And I decided, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to sacrifice my like personal beliefs and integrity for a scoop of ice cream. So I'm also going to call them. I was too mad to call them back after I had hung up, but I am going to call them, or perhaps write an email and let them know how upsetting that exchange was. And for my daughter to hear, other than I'm really glad she saw me stand my ground, and she didn't care. We went and got ice cream somewhere else where I could just drive through. So Julie said, I share your sentiments about masking. I struggle with how to navigate this with pregnant women who feel they are at risk because they are pregnant. Wish there was more research to show. I was just looking on the CDC yesterday because I had posted something on our Instagram story about COVID. So they slapped their stupid, like, if you want to learn more about COVID-19, go to, like, on top of my own story on IndieBirth's, page account. So I actually followed it because I was like, what are they wanting people to read? Like, I don't even understand. Why are they putting this on this? Why are they censoring me? So I clicked it, and I was looking at their information for pregnant women, and it was like, I'm going to have to look. But I did the calculation. I'm going to look right now because it's going to drive me crazy if I don't. It was something like 0.001. So a 0.1% chance of dying from COVID in pregnancy. It was something absolutely minuscule. And of course, we know that many women who are pregnant are extremely high risk for a million different reasons and have a million different comorbidities going on. So I would bet my life on the fact that women who have died from COVID-19 in pregnancy were people who are already quite sick. I'll have to find that later and maybe post it over on the social platform. It was on the CDC site. Yeah, they had like a graph, and then you could toggle through different options, and one of them was pregnancy, and it said how many cases had been reported. It was like 64,000 cases or something in pregnancy, and then it had the number of deaths, and I did my quick calculator on my phone. I was like, what's the percentage then? And it was 0.1%, which is very small. So a 99.99% chance of surviving. That said, there are some things that seem to come up as a result of having the virus during pregnancy, one of which is some strange clotting that both midwives and OBs have noticed. So some OBs are now recommending, I'm sure some midwives too are recommending, taking baby aspirin for the remainder of the pregnancy. I don't know that I would recommend that. I don't feel like the science has quite given us enough information yet to be recommending something like that, but it's something to be aware of. So yeah, there have been a few studies that showed there have been increased rates of strange placental issues, showing sort of like a lack of oxygenation or too much blood clotting that have made it so the placenta isn't getting as much of what it needs. So I won't pretend that it's completely harmless, and I won't pretend that there's zero risk, but I think it's really important for people to navigate it themselves in terms of what's the risk of going your entire pregnancy without seeing another human? What's the risk of, just treating yourself in a way that makes you feel so fragile and vulnerable and like you're a total victim of circumstance? So I don't pretend to, I guess if I were pregnant, I know that I would be doing the exact same thing I'm doing right now. That doesn't mean that that's the right thing to do for everybody, or what everybody should choose. But I guess I'm gonna have a sip of water and then I'll maybe continue my thought, which is that there are midwives here where I live who are making it mandatory that everybody at the birth have a mask on, including the partner and any children present. And if the children present cannot keep one on, they are not welcome to be in the room when the baby is being born, which I just find so horrific and so just such black and white thinking. So even if you thought masking works, which I don't think it does, it looks the science that I've looked at is pretty compelling that it doesn't even matter. It's really more of a symbol. And someone put it really well that it doesn't prevent spread of the virus, but it does help with many people's anxiety because everyone's so friggin' scared and it makes them feel safe. It's like their little security blanket. So I thought that was a really interesting point that they made. So even if you thought masks worked, I think anyone can be smart enough to know, okay, so I'm going to pretend I think they work, which I don't. If I thought they worked and I was at a birth as a midwife and the kids weren't wearing masks, the partner wasn't wearing masks, but the rest of my life I was wearing a mask when I went to I don't know, where do people go? Like TJ Maxx or something. That's what I always imagine, which is hilarious, right? So I refuse to wear a mask. Even if I was somebody who would wear one, I don't ever go in these stores anyways, because they're total garbage. And anyways, but all these people who are so terrified of the virus will put on their mask. That's probably ineffective, right? Most of the people who get COVID-19 were people who were, closely following mask protocols, allegedly. So even if, so they're putting on their mask and they're going to the mall because they're so terrified they're going to wear a mask, but they're going to go hang out at the food court at the mall. So don't get me started. But if I were one of these midwives who thinks masks are so important and that they work, I would feel okay with probably being at a birth in these limited birth situations where people weren't wearing them because the benefits do not outweigh the risks, and just the psychological comfort and experience of my clients. So I cannot understand why a midwife would ever do that, even if they think masks work. If they think they work, then she can wear one at the birth and she should not care what anyone else does. And then she can go about her life where she's wearing her mask, at Petco, and just feel really good about that, So I just think there's such bizarre and rigid approaches right now that don't take into account the risks and, maybe not even the physical risks, but the emotional risks and the psychological risks of your baby being born and, the mom wearing a mask, the dad wearing a mask, and that being the first imprint for this baby coming into this world. That would be so absolutely unacceptable to me. And I really encourage women who are in this position, if their midwife is making that call saying like, you have to wear one, or which is pretty rare. Like there aren't very many videos or photos out there right now of women wearing a mask, because everyone's like got common sense. I think even the most medically minded people, that like that is inhumane to put a mask on someone who is having a baby. But where's I going with that? I don't know, just that it's really bonkers to me, kind of where we're at. What I was going to say is that if women are being told this, and I heard a story recently of someone who wasn't told this was the policy, that at the birth, their family would have to wear a mask until the home visit around 36 weeks. And then what do? You're at the end of your pregnancy, you've hired this midwife, and they drop this bomb that your kids can't be in the room unless they have a mask on. And I just cannot believe that a midwife wouldn't mention that at the interview. Like, hey, I know that this is kind of like a controversial thing, and I want to give you a heads up that if that's part of your decision-making process, you should interview other midwives. This is my stance. And so it's one of those things, again, where like we talk about it all the time here at Indie Birth. Transparency, 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 being honest, having integrity as a birth worker. And sometimes we have blind spots, right? So like, I'm trying to think of a time recently. I can't remember what it was, but I had a client ask me something, and I was kind of surprised that they didn't know the answer, because they felt like, oh, someone should know that about me if they've chosen to work with me. Like maybe I should add that to my document. I also had somebody recently who's having, I think, their 7th baby, and has had other midwives, other home birth midwives in the past. She sat down with me and said, I don't really have a lot of questions for you at the interview. Because you had the most thorough paperwork, and paperwork's like not the right word. You had the most thorough like onboarding documents. That's not what she said, but that's what I would call them, that I've ever seen. I have is either 6 or 8 pages, my explanation of services, because I don't want anything to be a surprise for people. One, because I don't think that's fair to them. To spring on them something like, which this isn't my policy, but other midwives locally will not work with people past 42 weeks. They won't do breech. They won't do twins. So I think that it's important to lay out those black and white situations ahead of time, so that as much as possible, people can know what to expect. Like that's only fair to them. And it's also really good for me, because there's not any awkwardness then if things pop up. So there have been times when I thought someone's baby was breech, and instead of them having to say like, oh, well, what does that mean for me? Like, can I still work with you? They already know my position on breech, which is, it's complicated, but essentially, yes, I think breech is, a variation of normal, and is doable in almost every situation. It's a conversation. It's a thing we'd need to talk through, and there'd be a lot of learning involved and assessing how she wanted to move forward, but it's not a absolute book at all. So I guess where I'm going with that is I think that midwives really need to be transparent about this mask stuff. And I think that women really, this is an invitation to women to step up and actually communicate their truth in a powerful way and say, I'm not doing that, or like, I'm not having my partner do that, if that's how they feel, instead of just sort of grinning and bearing it. Like, it's just one of many examples, and it's just a weird new example of that. So yeah, I'd love to hear what other people think about this whole thing. But I know I'm especially feeling fired up right now to do some communicating and some being bolder. And, I've done a few things, a few places about this. I have an article, actually. I'm trying to remember what's that article called? If you're watching, Maren, and if you remember, you should, let me see. No More Business as Usual. It's great. One day I was just like super fired up and excited, and I wrote it. Not to toot my own horn, but I pasted the link over in the chat. But the title is No More Business as Usual. And maybe I'll do a follow-up one about some of this mask stuff. But I also did a pretty lengthy Instagram live about it somewhat recently as well. So I think that's probably enough ranting about that for me. But I know it's also been really super, super, super important to me, the couple of places that I've heard other people talk about similar beliefs. It's just felt so good to know that I'm not alone in this. And I don't know that I was very articulate about my thoughts around this here, about why I don't wear one. So I don't know why that is, other than maybe my brain needs some green tea or something this afternoon. But hearing other people explain themselves and their approach and just their convictions has really helped me feel, less alone. And so that's why I talk about it. And that's why I've been as public as I have been about it as much as possible. I don't want to feel like I'm hiding. I don't want to feel like there's something wrong with what I believe, because there's not. And I don't care if people like it. Oh, I guess this is fascinating. And there's been enough time that I feel like I can talk about it now. This is an interesting story. So we are doing a midwifery skills workshop here in this room, this new space. I'll show you just because it's pretty. So it's, this whole room, but that's kind of the teaching side of the room. We're going to be holding our midwifery skills workshop the 12th through the 14th. I'll be teaching it with Alicia, who was my apprentice and is now a midwife. And I put it in our newsletter and sent it out to our many, many, many thousands of people who are on the newsletter list. And I just happened to put like a footnote that, I don't wear a mask, Alicia doesn't wear one. So if people aren't comfortable with that, they should totally just wait till another time to come, which I thought was really benign. And again, transparent of me, because I didn't want to be dealing with those questions down the road. I wanted people to know upfront that that was the case. And we got tons of really cool replies saying, wow, that's really bold of you. And I really support that you're doing that for yourself. And I feel similarly. But one lady told me I should get a lawyer because she was going to shut it down. Fascinating, right? So I just blocked her and deleted her, and nothing has come of it, of course, because she's crazy and it's not illegal to gather people with or without masks at the moment here in Minnesota. But it was fascinating to see how strongly this woman reacted to an email about an event that she wasn't even going to come to. People are just really intense about this. Honesty said, you are not alone. My thoughts may be too much to type out here. Wow, that lady, ha ha ha. And then Bella Ellis said, can you talk a little bit more about why it feels so important to you? I'm interested in where the conviction stems from. Yeah, how could I even sum it up? To me, it just feels so in my heart and in my body. It's a bodily response, to covering. It feels so wrong to me that on some level, it's just that. It's just I don't want to. My body doesn't want to. My brain doesn't want to. It makes me anxious. It's uncomfortable. But the other part is I don't think they actually work. I don't think they actually stem the spread of the virus. And even if they did, I don't think the virus is actually scary. I think that it is very real and that it does make people really sick or can kill them when they either are of a certain age or have certain, predisposing health risks. And actually, I actually have some of them myself. I have a history of hypertension, and one could argue sometimes I do have hypertension depending on the day. But even then, I just, in the core of me, am not afraid. And if someone else is afraid, I feel like they should totally do whatever they need to do to protect themselves and to feel safe in their space. But I do not believe that it is my responsibility to do something that is non-physiological. It is not physiological to cover your face, and to cover your mouth and to cover your nose. Like, that makes no sense. No mammal would voluntarily do that. In order to, so I feel like it is not my responsibility to do that to make someone else feel safe. Does that make sense? So, yes, I want them to do what they need to do. And if that means they need to do curbside pickup for the next year, they should totally do that. But if I don't feel worried about going into public without a mask on and going to the grocery store, my belief is I should be able to do that. But then that's where like the business piece comes in. So like there's all these moving parts. So there's like individuals, like on a trail, right? Like I do a lot of walking on the road, doing hikes. And if I come up to someone and they say, hey, I'm social distancing, I'd appreciate 6 to 12 feet. I am more than happy to be like, oh yeah, sure. You should totally go 6 to 12 feet that way and give me some space. Or, create that space. But if somebody said, I need 6 to 12 feet, and that meant I needed to climb up, and I've never used this metaphor before, so it might be a little rough, but if they're like, hey, I'm social distancing and I need 6 to 12 feet, and we're on like a narrow pathway, I'm not going to climb up the side of a mountain to give them their 6 to 12 feet. Like, they need to then do that. Does that make sense? And so I think that we need to take care of each other as neighbors and as a community. And I think we should respect the way that other people feel about any of these topics. But I also bring up sometimes, this is really interesting, I think, there are people I know who I have had come over to play with my kids, for example, and we'll be playing and I'll say, oh, why didn't so-and-so, one of their kids come along that day? Like 2 of their 3 kids will be there. When I've invited them all over for a play date, say, oh, like, why isn't Susie here? I don't know anyone named Susie. Why isn't Susie here? And they'll be like, oh, she stayed home because she's super sick. And I'm like, do you know how sickness works? Because now you brought your other 2 kids over who are probably also carrying it, or possibly are also carrying it. And now you're exposing my whole family to whatever cold, flu, whatever. And again, not that I'm afraid of those things at all. It's more just like inconvenient when everyone in the house gets a bug. So some of those people who would bring their kids over and leave the one sick kid home, or sometimes they'll bring their kid over and they're like, oh yeah, they were super sick a day or 2 ago. Those people are now the ones who are like, oh, I'm only meeting people outside or with a mask on because we don't want to spread those virus. And I'm like, what happened to last year when you infected my whole family? So there's just some like really interesting logic that's not like syncing up, it feels like, around like common decency and how to not get other people sick. Like, even mainstream people are like, wow, like people are actually washing their hands for once, or they're like actually staying home from work when they're sick. Like, that's something I've always done, because why would you go to work sick and get everyone else sick? Like, why would you do that? Other than for times when you like are in poverty and like have to go to work to get your check. But that's something that's become super normalized in our culture up until right now, is even if you're sick, you still go to work. My partner Russell used to work in the food industry, and unless somebody was throwing up or had a fever, they were still there working, flipping your burgers, even at like nice restaurants, right? Like people are like sneezing and hacking and coughing and sniffling, making people's food. Now that doesn't happen, hopefully in most places. But that was normal in our culture up until last year. And so there's like some very common sense things where it's like, yeah, like I don't want to get COVID-19 because I don't really want to like be sick. I really don't, even if it's mild, I don't really want to do that. I don't want to take care of my sick kids if they get it, which it seems like kids don't really even get it. Mostly I don't want my partner to get like the man cold version of COVID-19. He one time got the chicken pox. I won't talk about it in depth right now. It was a sore sight. Anyways, so So mostly I just don't want the inconvenience of it. I'm not afraid it's going to kill my family, knock on wood, right? Like I also know that none of us are invincible or bulletproof. So there's a possibility that, the regular flu could be the thing that kills someone in my family. But where's I going with that? Just to say that, yeah, there's common sense things like, yeah, let's not all get each other sick. And then there's also common sense around the mask stuff where it's like, it might look differently for different people, but for me, the common sense thing is like, I'm not sick. Sure, I might be an asymptomatic carrier, but also if masks work and I'm at the grocery store and I'm 6 feet away from someone who's wearing a mask and they work, supposedly, then why do I need to put one on? So for me, it's more like just a bodily response, and it's a psychological response and a philosophical, like I should be allowed to make this choice for myself. And funny enough, I never wore one early on in the pandemic, but I did get some around the time when people were first starting to say like, yeah, maybe masks are helpful, which again, I don't think they actually are. But around that time, our neighbor gave us some, and I guess I never bought one, but I was open to the possibility of like, okay, like if this is what's good for my community, this is something I'm open to doing for them, to protect myself, to protect them. But since I don't actually believe that, I'm not willing to do something symbolic that doesn't actually feel true for me to protect someone who has a different perspective than me. If I didn't feel like it was super restrictive, like if it was more like, and this is just kind of a ridiculous example, but if it was like, oh, all of us have to wear hats. Like wearing a hat will somehow protect everyone if we all go out in public with hats on. I'd wear a hat. Sure, like I'm not ridiculous. But the covering of a face, like the rebreathing of the same air, they stink, they're gross. I walked by someone, I think I've gone in twice to the grocery store in the last year, essentially, or 11 months or whatever. And one was recently because I wanted some like a snack or something. I don't know. And I didn't want to go through a drive-through because that was like the only other option. So I was like, whatever, I'll wear my fake mask in. And I did. And I walked by a lady who smelled so terrible. Like this was with my fake mask on. Her like cigarette smoke smell like floated off of her and stuck to my fake mask, my mesh mask. And the rest of the frigging 5 minutes I was in the store, I was inhaling cigarette smoke smell. It was disgusting. And I was like, how is this better than me going in and being able to just breathe the air? And like, I don't know. I don't even know how to describe it sometimes. But for me, it just felt so wrong. And I left being like, I'm not doing this again. So I also had to drop off some coffee recently. If you're not familiar with like the Line 3 situation and the water protectors here in Minnesota, my partner donated some coffee and I was dropping it off at a bakery, which was taking the donations and getting them to the activists and frontline like water protectors. And I had to figure out like, how am I going to get this coffee in the store because they require masks. So same thing. I just put on like one ear loop and like left it hanging to pretend I had one on. Or like to pretend like I was someone who ever had a mask around, and brought it in and just handed it to the guy and he didn't care. So that's what also is so interesting about this whole thing is like the businesses that have signs that say mask is required, but they don't actually mean it. And that to me also feels like it lacks serious integrity. And so I would rather each business just be upfront and honest and be willing to just, see what happens, how it shakes out. There's a coffee company actually in California called Coffee, I think, with a K. And they refused to shut down their cafe when the California government said every restaurant had to shut down. It's so inspiring. And it at least seemed like, I'm going to look for it. It seemed like to me, they really got a lot of support and love and interest from people all around the country saying like, thank you for standing up for your business. And they even said, like, if you're worried about getting sick, don't come in, like, just don't come in then, or we can run it out. But like, we're not going to shut the whole cafe down when there's still tons of people who would happily come in and buy coffee, with or without a mask, and enjoy it and feel good and connect with each other and, create more community. And so that's the feeling that I want to create, with my business, as Duluth midwife here in Duluth, and also with Indie Birth. Like, I don't want to hide and I don't want to pretend like we're buying into this, because we're not. Jennifer said, for me, I'm not worried for myself or kids or husband. If we get sick, my mom, I don't want her to die right now. Yeah, I totally get it. And like I said, it really just depends on everyone's different situation and their risk benefit analysis. And this is something that people said, they jumped all over me on my own Facebook page, which I am not using Facebook anymore because I just hate it. People are like, don't you have any elderly people in your life? And I said, no, we really don't. And that's a part of the way that our culture is broken, right? Like, we don't know anybody over the age of 45 closely here where I live. We moved here almost 5 years ago. And aside from my godparents, who have essentially like disowned us because I don't vaccinate my children, we really don't know anybody in the above 60 bracket. If my parents lived here, actually, my parents and Russell's parents both visited us last summer, and we all spent time together without quarantining beforehand. But it was up to them, like I'm totally respectful of what their choice is too. But my parents were like, we're not worried. Did they drive here? Yeah, they drove here instead of flying because they didn't want to deal with the airline stuff and their like rules. They drove here across country and stayed in hotels and then stayed with our family for a week or 2 weeks. And so did Russell's parents. But if they had said to us, hey, we don't feel safe right now, come to visit, especially with the way that you guys maybe are approaching things, like we are still seeing friends, just like normal, like our life is essentially normal, except for we're doing a lot less of that because there's less opportunity to do so. So Jennifer said, my two biggest concerns about COVID are the consent thing, like me unknowingly giving it to someone else. The other is missing births because I'm sick. Yeah, so I checked in with not all of my clients, but when it was kind of like at its highest peak here in Duluth and we started knowing people close to us who were getting it, I did talk to my clients and check in with them how they felt about it. One of my clients had already had it. So she didn't care if I was sick with it when her birth time came around. She was like, you can totally come. I don't care. And the other one hadn't had it, but she said they didn't care either. So again, the consent thing and talking about things ahead of time is important. I would also hate to miss a birth because maybe I'm too sick to even go, right? And then, right, the consent piece, unknowingly giving it to someone else. My question is, why haven't we cared about that with other viruses? Is my question. And you don't have to agree with me, Jennifer. I totally respect that if you maybe have come to a different place with some of this stuff. But if you wanted to have a conversation, to me, it's a similar, that's the main question I have is, we've all been giving each other viruses and exchanging viruses throughout our lives. And it's like the stigma of this one and that feeling of like, oh my gosh, what if I give this virus to somebody, feels really different than like, well, what if I give whatever else to somebody? And there are other viruses that are stigmatized, obviously. Right. Like I can think of a couple that I won't get into right now, but probably what I'm talking about, some of which are like sexually transmitted. But yeah, I think I can totally understand that feeling of like, oh gosh, I don't want to kill someone's grandma. Like, no, I definitely don't want to do that. Right. Isn't that what people are called when they won't wear masks? Grandma killers. I've heard that one. But I also feel like, I guess I didn't talk about this yet, but I do feel for me personally, I'm just speaking personally, like I'm someone who really believes strongly in nature and divine timing, and that nature is wise. And to me, if this virus has come about and really is dangerous, where am I going with this? That, death is part of life. We all will eventually die. So a good example is Russell knows somebody who just posted, my mother-in-law died from COVID. And we're really sad and upset and like, please wear your masks. Someone just posted this recently. And he's like, she was like in her 90s, like, again, how can you say that it was necessarily COVID, or maybe would have been whatever virus she got this winter, that would have been the last thing that her body could withstand before, being done with this lifetime. So I'm kind of jumping around, but essentially I'm saying, I think we have a choice when it comes to how we approach this. We can approach things from a place of fear, or we can approach things from a place of love. And sometimes it's hard to suss out the two. And it's one thing if someone elderly says like, I'm really afraid of this. I don't want to get it right now. I don't feel safe being around people. And it's another for us to decide that for them, and to be like, well, now we're going to do this for them. When we could instead say, whoever is worried about this, whoever does need more support, like how can we as a community arrange for that while we go on living our lives and perhaps develop, antibodies as a community, so that maybe there won't even be any cases, or will be way less even sooner. And so that was an approach that Sweden took. I know it's controversial. The scientists are all arguing whether or not it worked or it didn't. I definitely think it looks like it worked well, in that many of them have already had it go through their community. And now those elderly people are safer than they would have been if they had just shut down the entire economy for the last year. And so, I think it would be really neat to see, like, we have neighbors who are in their 60s, 70s, 80s. And if one of them said to me like, hey, I'm afraid to go grocery shopping, is there any way that you would do my shopping when you run in? I would happily do that for them, and I'd leave it on their porch, whatever felt good. But to make all of the healthy people who aren't afraid submit to something that actually hasn't been proven to be helpful, and even if it was proven to be helpful, to mandate that they do it just feels really wrong to me. So again, people don't have my mask stance. So I think I'm going to cut myself off and just kind of close with my last thought, which is to return to that card, the peace card, and letting go. What was it? What was the word? It was so good. Dissolving the things which don't bring us peace. Dissolving those thoughts and letting them go, and finding ourselves in a place where we have the blue sky mind. And with that, I think I will be done for this Sunday. If you want to subscribe to our YouTube channel, we would totally appreciate that. I would love to answer questions. So if you have them, post them over. I'll start a thread right now. I will go start a thread on the Mighty Network, which is social.indiebirth.org, or use the Mighty Network app and search Indie Birth Association. It's free, and you can interact with this really amazing community of people. I think there's over 2,000 of us there. But I'll post in the main network a question thread. And if you have some that you'd love for me to cover next week, whether it's about life, being a woman, birth, midwifery, whatever it is, I would love to hear what questions you have and to answer some of them. So that's it from me. And I'll talk to you all next Sunday, same time, same place.